Hello again, everyone. So let's start our fourth panel of the day, the future of interactivity, NFT integration in the Metaverse. So I would like to ask Dr. Christina Yang Zhang to please introduce the rest of the guests. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Christina Yan Zhang. I'm the CEO of the Metaverse Institute, and also I'm the co-chairman for the United Nations International Telecommunication Union's working group on Cityverse. So we advise UN, government, investors on international standards and regulatory affairs to do with cutting-edge technology. Today, I'm really delighted to be joined by a group of distinguished experts in different fields related to NFT and the Metaverse. Let me introduce them one by one. The first speaker is Des A, and clearly he already has a very strong fan base in our audience. Wonderful. And he is founder of the world-leading Web3 creative agency, Soca World. And they have a lot of world record already. So they held the first NFT tickets music event in the UK in 2019, right? And also the first NFT project at Wembley Arena and achieved the first NFT project to impact the official album chart worldwide. Wow, that's very impressive.
Thank you.
How did you do that?
Through a lot of stress and negotiations. So my background is that I'm in the process of just finishing off my PhD in intellectual property copyright law, and I've been working in the music industry for the past 10 years. And I was fortunate to get involved in the Web3 space quite early on. And so I was really fortunate to obviously understand the culture of the music industry coupled with obviously the tech side. And I sit in that very niche space of people in the music industry trusting what I've done because I've worked there for a long time, but also understanding the tech industry and understanding the culture and being able to liaise the two. And so with that, I've been able to obviously do really cool case studies with my company, Soca World, which stands for Sales of Goods Act, which for any legal professionals here, it stands for, it's the 1883 law piece that basically looks after governs the relationships between two or more entities. And so as an agency, we govern the relationships between the music industry and also the tech space, and we sit in the middle. And so, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. We're really delighted to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is John Scott Perko, and he is actually a visiting professor. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been a professor for 27 years as an adjunct, in addition to my other businesses. But yeah, the professorship has been something I really enjoy. And I've gotten to watch teaching before my kids were born. Now my kids are 26 and 25, and now I feel especially old. But it's been an interesting kind of pulse over the years to keep track of how my students are evolving and how they're growing and working. And I have several thousand former students now. It's been interesting to see.
And he has been very modest because in addition to teaching students at university, he is also one of the leading experts in executive coach. So he has a very distinguished career of 25 years, coaching some of the world's largest Fortune 500 CEOs on how to make money, but also make their employee happy. Is that right?
It's, coaching the C-suite around the world is a very unique and rewarding experience for me. So I find that the challenges behaviorally kind of supersede any geographic distance, verticals of industry and business. And I find it very rewarding. So I work across the world with that, coaching C-suites, working with boards of directors and ex-coms, and then doing large-scale organizational change with companies like Airbus, BNP Paribas, Vuitton, a number of different brands. So yeah, quite like my work. It's been fun, and I'm enjoying my career.
Wonderful. Really great to have you. And our next speaker is Charlotte Mayer. We are going to have a competition. So every single speaker, after we make introduction, you need to cheer. And we are going to vote.
Alex, what's up, man? No. Come on, man.
Shall we do that again for John Prescott?
Not at all forced. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Let's go back to Charlotte. So Charlotte is working for a very important company, Binance. I'm actually a happy client of you guys. Yeah. And she specialized in government affairs and policies and working very closely with ministers and parliamentarians to help promote and shape the crypto asset industry. We all love you. It's not an easy task. Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know what to say to that more, but yeah, I used to work in the UK government. I worked in the Home Office for about 5 years. My last year was actually working on crypto asset policy, where we were looking to deal with illicit assets and that have been used asset recovery basically for the law enforcement. And so they were looking to update this law and looking to cover crypto. And so I came in and was part of the team that is now, I think the law is just about to get royal assent in the UK government, which will allow police or our National Crime Agency to seize assets that have been sort of involved, crypto assets that have been involved in fraud or any sort of cyber attacks, things like that. And that sort of was where I sort of, my love of crypto sort of came through, and from there I sort of went on to work for Binance because of this sort of heavy connection with the government and ministers, and so here I am.
Wonderful. Yeah, and you know, some people say Rishi Sunak is very much pro-crypto. How far do you agree or disagree with that?
I think he himself, I think he is pro-crypto. I think he's got a very, very bad set of cards, I think a bad hand at the moment. I think he can't do what he would like to do with it. You look at the state of the economy in the UK, and I think he's got bigger issues on his plate rather than looking at crypto, I'm afraid. So I think he thinks it's a great idea, but it's just not top of his list of things to be looking at the moment.
So maybe we need a more expert like you to educate them better to know the beauty of crypto.
Well, to see the beauty of it and how it can actually maybe help the economy. But sadly, I think it's not on the agenda, which will be sad because we've got an election coming up in the UK where I think the Conservatives party he's part of won't get into power, and then it'll be another sort of a brand new start to sort of the negotiating table, talking to the Labour ministers about how crypto is beneficial. So yeah, I think in the UK it's going to be an interesting time for crypto over the next few years. We might see a few sort of setbacks, politically anyway, I think.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Hopefully we shall overcome with you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Our next speaker is Benjamin Whitby. And Benjamin has actually been in the space since 2013 when he was taking care of the capital market and wholesale compliance within HSBC. So very distinguished career. And now he is one of the founding team of CREDO. Is that how you say it? Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And they are helping over 450 teams, 58,000 individuals to secure their crypto assets and provide a extremely efficient way to engage with crypto. And I think their users transact close to $10 billion asset every month. What a figure.
Yeah, it's pretty humbling actually to kind of be part of a team that's built such a fundamental kind of tool within the ecosystem. But we built it for teams, and teams are giving us some amazing feedback and telling us that they're loving engaging in the space. But we work with very sophisticated teams. We're not just kind of the buy and hold type organizations. These teams are deploying their assets into DeFi. They're deploying their assets into various different smart contracts. I think one of the largest assets that the CREDO wallet supports is an asset called Aave Staked ETH, which is Ethereum that's been staked with Lido and then lent through Aave to create a yield-bearing token. So they're getting quite a yield from that asset and sweating that asset in a quite sophisticated manner. We started the project in 2018. It's been amazingly well received, and I never thought that we would get to that number especially in a bear market. It's phenomenal.
So I would say nothing is impossible to a willing heart in crypto if you find the right way, like you guys.
Crypto never sleeps. That's the challenge. And one of the things that we built for in 2018 is now radically improved because we've got the ability to put automated key signing transactions in place. So you don't have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning because your NFT is going to get liquidated. And it's going to be a massive collateral call. You can code logic around that and make sure you've got protections in place to protect all your assets.
Wonderful. And you actually did your degree in quantum physics. And
Yeah.
you are now working in regulation.
Yeah, I switched from quantum physics into coding and then coding into regulation. And that was at a time in 2001 where I built the world's first interest rate swaps trading platform. And we ended up doing the same kind of negotiations with the government that Charlotte does. It's like you need to go off and talk to people and make sure that they understand the paths that you're treading and where the laws and the regulations kind of impact those paths so that we could have a clean runway of launching our products. And that's exactly where I feel crypto is at this moment in time. The technology is now at a mature enough stage that with the right kind of runway and support within the various different kind of governmental channels, we can see tremendous growth across the economy.
Amazing. That's from a quantum physics expert's view. A lot of like weight.
You have to get back to the fundamentals in everything that you do.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Let's go straight to the question. So how can NFT redefine digital assets ownership in the metaverse? Des, do you want to have a start?
Yeah, I mean, from some of the case studies that I've done within my agency, specifically around, obviously, within the music industry, which seems to be like the one thing that everybody wants to kind of gravitate towards, we found that, obviously, the main beauty about NFTs is the ability to ascribe value to digital creations. And so whereby back in the, well, before, even still now, where you can basically copy and paste your JPEGs, your different type of online files, and that would have no monetary value to it. I feel that now, because of the technology and because of blockchain tech, now those digital files actually have some sort of monetary value, and that basically changes the way how we can basically deal with any type of assets. And so in terms of it being used and some of the stuff that we've gone and done within our agency, as I said, we went and did the first NFT project to impact the UK charts. And with that, that basically entailed us being able to create NFTs and then linking them as a bundle. So when people bought the NFT, so we went and worked with a Manchester artist called H. We went and got to number 2 in the charts, which was a great feat. But unfortunately, we lost to Steps because at the time it was their what do you call it, their all hits album and whatnot. So we weren't going to be able to beat them because they had some hits. But the point was that people were able to buy this particular NFT, and then that NFT was connected to the vinyl, the seller of the vinyl or the CD. And it was interesting because obviously, naturally, the music industry has been so scared of working with technology purely because obviously the past where technology has basically decimated the music industry because of downloads and whatnot. And so it was interesting to be able to work alongside them to kind of show them a really positive case study, specifically with the OCC, the official charts company. And for them, what was important was like a lot of the things that we do within the music, like within the NFT space in terms of being able to have digital digital assets that are unique and very different to every single one. That's obviously where the value is held, similar to like with your Bored Apes, where the Bored Apes are, all of them are individual. They said that that would not be allowed within the OCC because then people are not buying the NFT for the music, which is important. They're buying it because they want it to be a monetary value towards it. And they said that's not really fair because it's just gamifying the system and tricking people to buy in the songs rather than buying the songs for the reason of it being a great song. And so they gave us the example of BTS. Now, obviously, BTS, they have quite a number of people in their band, about, I can't remember, but they said that what happened was whenever they release an album, they have a different album cover for each of the different band members, and your super fans will end up buying all the different albums, not just because of the music, but because they wanted all the different albums like a collectible. They said even though that's great for record sales, that is not fair on the charts. And so to then have that same implication alongside having an NFT where people will buy the NFTs just because they're all individual, they said that wasn't allowed. And then they proceeded to give me like a 200-page book in order to read of all the different laws and stuff in order to make sure that it was fair whenever they release any music so that it's chart compliant. And so, yeah, so we were able to do that and complete that. And that was a really great case study to kind of show how NFTs can be used and can have value, not necessarily within the metaverse, but necessarily in real life. And I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people need to kind of get their head around, just being able to use the tech in real life, especially with guys like us who may not necessarily be of the younger generation, but because they would understand it completely. I mean, you've got kids who are on Roblox and whatnot, like who understand swords have yield curves and stuff, which is insane. But I feel like that's one of the things that we need to kind of look at when it comes to NFTs having value in the real world.
Interesting. So, John Scott, what do you think?
You know, it's interesting. As I read the bios of all the people up here, I have the least technical background. And so I look at things from a behavioral perspective and what becomes commonplace. And you just mentioned when it comes to the music industry, I've had a few conversations with friends of mine, and I've spoken to Alex about this. So my friend Ron and I go back till kindergarten, believe it or not, and he was the lead guitarist with Guns N' Roses for 8 years. So I called him up a couple of years ago, and I said, hey, let's have a conversation about NFTs. He goes, you're like the 50th person to call me about this. He goes, I'm still struggling with the fact that I had 300,000 downloads on a song I created, and 10 years ago, that would have been worth whatever. He goes, and guess how much it's now? And I said, what? He goes, I got a check for like $1,400. I'm like, what? So trying to reintroduce value, whether it be in the metaverse, in the normal world that we're living in, the real, I don't know, how do you want to say it, the real world we're living in. I think it's interesting. When it comes to art, there's also a number of use cases that make it really relevant in the real world and also in the metaverse. I know it's for the subject that we're talking about. Trying to see how we can look at the interactivity between integrating these technologies with changing consumer behaviors. So one of the classes I teach for a number of years is consumer psychology, and looking at what becomes normal and commonplace. And it's interesting because I feel like my kids are 26 and 25. They're like too old to kind of get this, and young enough to, they're hit this weird generational piece where like 4 years younger, it's much different, but my kids, it's going over their head. Like I'm talking about things that they don't know what we're doing. So I think that we have an opportunity to reimagine. And I think that's what it comes to. I hate to get too like in the sky about this, but it's just imagining new ways of interacting with media, with entertainment, with things that we find really important and impactful. And it is interesting. I never thought about that. If you're buying like 5 different albums, like how it's going to skew the charts. And the artists will probably say, we should have all those sales count. When it comes to the NFT aspect of it and the interactivity, I think the real physical item tied to digital assets is what most of the interest I feel coming from people I talk to and my clients. And this is true also with, I had dinner last week with one of my clients who's at Prada at the moment, and he's leaving Prada. And we had a whole conversation about how fashion's going to go deeper into this, how they're kind of testing the waters, and the consumers just aren't there yet. And I do think that I'm a big believer and speak often about courage and action. And I think organizations and leaders and all of us have to address our discomfort with new things where we're normally opposed. And I'm an American, and I live in a place where anything unfamiliar is very alarming to many people in different categories. But I think we have an opportunity to really reimagine this, to reimagine how this is going to impact how we live, how we work, how we consume media, how we consume art, how we consume physical products. And I think it's an exciting time for us. So.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Charlotte, you have been doing a lot of really important work on regulations. So what do you think? How can NFT really redefine the future landscape of digital assets?
I think the big question, well, there's a few big questions in regulation about NFTs. Actually, the first one is how are we going to regulate them? There's not been a lot of work done actually on NFTs at the moment. Europe, for example, MiCA, the regulation coming through, doesn't even touch NFTs. In the UK, the regulation that we're planning to bring through, again, doesn't really touch NFTs. And I think, again, what John Scott sort of brought up is that I think there's a reluctance and a fear from regulators, fear of the unknown. They're not sure how to deal with NFTs, and you know, we say that, you know, they're so vast. It could be art, they can be tokenized contracts, they can be a number of different things, and it's a shame because they're so reluctant to hear what we have to say about them and how we can utilize them so effectively in the world. And it's, like I say, it's such a shame because I think bringing together things like the TradFi and crypto together, I think it's so valuable. And well, actually, I say that, but to be fair, in the UK, as an example, actually, I think we're going down the right track. So, for example, this is they described it as the blockchain bill, and the bill that they coined it I think they said it was the most important bill that you don't know about, and it's just been passed through Parliament, and I think it's called the Digital Trade Contract Bill or Digital Trade Contract Act. And this is something that I think has been really overlooked by a lot of people. And this bill is very, very simple, and it's basically giving companies the ability to trade goods, services, now using digitization, right? So, for example, if you're trading commodities, you're selling bananas, they're shipping across the world. You've got this bill of lading, so sometimes they can be scrappy bits of paper. You can now use a digitized token version of that. That's just gone through in the UK, and I think that's a huge step for NFTs in general in regulation. And it's been completely overlooked. It's not been in the press, and it's such a fantastic piece of legislation because it now opens us up to using that, not just in trade, but in anything. It's there, it's in UK law. And so I think generally across the world, we're starting off really slowly. People are reluctant, but it's gems like this that I think the UK, okay, maybe in some of our regulation, how we're pushing forward with crypto in general, not great, but how we're utilising NFTs and the technology is a really good start with this bill. And so I think, I think it's promising, in the UK at least, but I'm biased.
It's really interesting you mentioned that because I was chairing the opening panel discussion at the World Intellectual Property Organization's high-level discussion on IP and Metaverse, where NFT came up very often. And regulators worldwide, they are struggling to define which blanket to put it in.
Yeah, and also the UK again as well. I mean, I don't want to toot our horn because we're not great at some things, but the UK as well has defined NFTs as property. Our Law Commission did a huge study on it over the last few years, and they've come to the conclusion that crypto assets, NFTs, are all personal property. They can be defined under law as that. And so now they're looking to change. They're going to the government and they said, we need to make these changes, that crypto will be considered as property. NFTs are property. And again, it's such a huge step forward in defining, people's rights and what these things are. And so I think it's fascinating and so exciting that the UK has actually, jumped on this and actually moving forward.
Wonderful. Ben, I know you have been doing lots of work in the financial services, and your company, their trading volume is massive. So what do you think NFT can really redefine the whole landscape?
So CREDO doing massive volumes in the DeFi space is nothing compared to the traditional financial space. So if we go back to kind of Charlotte's example about trade finance, HSBC, my previous firm, does $13 of every $100 of the global trade finance position, which is insane, right? So every shipping container that you see going from backwards and forwards across the sea, chop that 13% down the middle, HSBC is financing every single one of those, which is an amazing amount of money. Now, again, I talk about things and I like to kind of get back to first principles, and when I talk about NFTs, people kind of gravitate towards, oh, they're the monkey JPEGs, aren't they? But really, what we've got within this framework of technology that we've now got in the world today with these public chains is an ability to document anything that we can have that goes with our imagination. And that can be everything from the boring stuff to the most flamboyant, imaginative positions and art and movies and different things like that. And so everything that you have in your life that exists on paper today or has a kind of durable medium of any sort, be it a memory card or a floppy disk or a CD or a DVD or anything like that, anything that exists on that medium will be an NFT in the future, 100%. Absolutely 100% will that be an NFT. And it's going to move to that position because the powers that this crypto asset brings to the space in terms of provenance and being able to claim ownership and demonstrate ownership of that thing is going to be so important. Now, when I go back and talk about NFTs again, when I speak to people in government, I talk about strip things back to the most basic form of medium that you can possibly talk about. You go through all those different types of durable medium, from the DVDs, the Blu-rays, the hard disks, etc. And you land on paper, and you get people to focus on paper. And you say, right, okay, well, think of a piece of paper. Think about everything that's written on a piece of paper. Your driving license, your house deed, your titles, your art, documents, your books, etc. If you give that piece of paper to a lawyer or to a financier or a banker, then they'll write you an ISDA contract. And that ISDA contract carries with it lots of very well-defined regulatory positions. There are regulatory positions that are in place today under MiFID, under Dodd-Frank, etc. If you give that piece of paper to an 8-year-old girl, you'll get a picture of an amazing butterfly and an amazing kind of position. Now, you don't need to regulate that picture of a butterfly in the same way that you regulate the ISDA contract. And we need to help people understand that these things that are coming out, the outcomes of this technology, are very different. And they exist now, today. We've got lots of paper-based stuff that will migrate, that you can say, this is a digital representation of this thing. But in the creative space, we're going to be creating pure digital product that doesn't exist in anywhere other place. And that is an amazing, amazing position to be in. Because once you can get into that position, then you can start to really empower the creative artists. And those artists, in my opinion, are being really hard done by the frameworks that are in place in the corporations today.
It's fascinating you say that, because we all know the Citigroup made a prediction about the overall economic impact of the Metaverse 2 years ago, and it said by 2030 it's going to be $13 trillion, which is a massive number. So my following up question is, what kind of impact could or will NFT have on the creation of the $13 trillion economy predicted?
Do you want me to follow on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right,
yeah.
so one of the really amazing things that NFTs are going to do to this space is it's going to stop things like human trafficking, human slavery, the provenance of goods. You're going to be able to demonstrate that the high-value fashion goods that you bought have actually been produced in the factory that you think they have. They'll be tagged and tied, and you'll be able to track all the way down to who made that particular item. Who made your watch, who made your handbag, who made your car, etc., etc., etc. And that means that you can demonstrate that people are being paid a fair wage, which means that poverty can be really, really nicely tackled with this new technology, because you can see the people that are doing things well and the people that are doing things poorly. And I have this conversation when we go to kind of dinner parties and over beers with my friends, and it's like, people again, you have to go to the extremes to kind of take these examples into where it kind of really matters. And it's like, say you're getting married and you're buying your partner a diamond wedding ring. Would you buy that ring if the diamond on the top was a high-class provenance diamond that came from a reputable dealer? Or would you buy the same diamond if it came from a backwater blood diamond kind of scenario? And I pretty much guarantee that everybody would go and do the right thing. And all those blood diamonds that are causing so much pain and aggregation in the world would fall away because there wouldn't be a market for them.
Just to compound on that, so this idea about the Web3 space is going to completely cannibalize the current industries, I think it's just nonsense. I feel like I was speaking earlier to Charlotte about like the whole idea that people thought that when Kindles came about, that was going to completely decimate the book industry, and what's happened now. Like what you now tend to find is that a lot of the digital companies or the digital processes are now supplementary to what's currently out there in the physical space. And so what you will find is like, they call it like the carnivore and the herbivore mentality. When there's loads of grass, everybody starts to eat it, and until there's no more grass, and then they start to cannibalize each other, and that turns into like a carnivore atmosphere. But we're not even at that stage yet. Like the grass hasn't even fully grown. We can see what's going to happen. And so just to answer the question, I believe that the industry is going to be able to build like a completely new revenue stream, and that's going to be supplementary until it reaches a point of saturation. Then it will start to kind of eat into the digital space, the physical space, but we're still far away from that.
How many years do you think we will reach the middle point as you predicted?
Well, obviously, we just recently got, from a United States perspective, a regulation on one of the crypto assets, XRP. So until we get more of that, and we get more people getting involved in actually using the technology without actually, and this is another thing that is a kind of a pet peeve of mine, we kind of have to move away from using the terms like blockchain, NFTs and whatnot, if we're going to actually move the space, accelerate the space into a place where, and like my grandma could use the technology and whatnot. Because at the moment, you're not going to go onto the website and say, oh yeah, I'm going to use HTTP to get onto Instagram. It's like, nobody cares about that. They just want to be able to get to Instagram or get to be able to socialize with the people without understanding the back end. And I feel like the moment we understand that and we actually start using terminologies that is a lot more nicer for the everyday general public to use, that's when we'll start to see that turn, and that's when you start to see like the value of like the space start to increase massively.
Interesting.
Yeah, I agree. We had this conversation earlier, and I think that's it. It's not everything is sort of black and white, and I think you really need to bring the technology into everyday uses and stop sort of putting it out there as something strange and odd, and actually people need to find ways of, we as builders and people in this room obviously have all got, companies, new ideas, innovative ideas, and it's maybe actually not having them out on silos and going down these just sort of ideas of this is what we're going to do and it's going to be within the crypto space and that's it. It's actually looking into the wider utility of how you can bring these into, say, the music industry without it being, out there as an NFT doing this. No. It just naturally moves in and sort of merges with the industry, and then it, without people realizing they're using NFTs for this, that, and the other. I think, you say about your grandma. If my dad's going, this is ridiculous. It's a monkey on a screen. Well, actually, it's getting to the point where he doesn't even realize that he's using an NFT for X, Y, and Z. And I think that's when, and that's what we were talking about. It's when it becomes just so part of society that people don't say the word NFT because it's just normal. People don't, like you say, how does the internet work? No one really knows, but we all use it and it's great. That's the same way that we should use the metaverse and NFTs. It just becomes this natural thing that we all do. And I think, and it's the same, and bringing it back to regulation, I think that's where regulators have got it wrong, is that they see it this awful thing out on the sideline that's going to come in and ruin traditional finance, or it's going to cause all these issues. No, it needs to merge with everything. It needs to come in, and we can utilize the technology and the way that we do things, and for good and for the benefit of everyone. And it's just, I think it's people in this room that actually we need to think maybe slightly differently in how we approach this and approach regulators or approach, you know, big business, and take a different stance with it, and show people that actually coming together and working together is how the technology is going to flourish and how we're all going to evolve in the world.
It's interesting, when I was at the Museum of the Future in Dubai last week for an artist that was presenting her artwork and how she uses artificial intelligence, where 10 years of her artwork would digitize and analyzed, and she has this very, almost like a dance with a robotic arm that has analyzed all of her artwork in strokes. So now she'll paint a line, and then the machine paints a line, and then she'll paint a line, and then it's very, very mind-blowing. And she gave a great statement the other day, which was, we need to stop thinking about this in the binary, right? So, you know, there's NFTs, digital, whatever you want to call it, and then the real world. And this is, she calls it a non-human collaboration, which I thought was quite interesting. And then when we look at this, I can remember at the genesis of the music transformation to digital, like we had MP3 players. And then the iPod came out, and we've never, I don't think anyone today thinks of anything as MP3 players. You know, so similarly, even the nomenclature is shifting. So now everyone, because of Bored Apes and everything else, and you know, now they're like, you know, we have the physical copy and a digital copy. You know, like whatever it is, just to kind of homogenize it and make it a little bit less threatening or a little less tied to it.
Ease them in.
Yeah, so I think it is really interesting. And we go back to this behavioral dynamics, right? Where like you'll go out and people are terrified about artificial intelligence. It's going to take all our jobs. And I just gave a webinar the other day about this. And I say, you know, you've been using artificial intelligence for quite a long time. Like this is not a brand new technology. And it's like, what do you mean? Hold on a second. Hey Siri, and I'm like, you just use it right now. You know, so I think that we have to really look at things in an integrated, interactive, interoperable way, where it's not one thing or another. It's like, how can we kind of work in concert and learn? And I think we're all dealing with this human reflex to shun things that are new and different and, you know, terrifying to us, you know, because it's unusual. So I think we have an opportunity now to look at how this can really benefit humanity going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for instance, if you was to speak to blacksmiths like 150 years ago, and you said to them, oh, we've got this new invention called cars, what do you think about it? Obviously, they're going to say that it's rubbish because they want to have more horses, because obviously that's where their business is coming from. When in reality, like the creation of the car, they had so many different components to it which created new jobs. And I think that's the same mindset that we kind of have to have with this technology, is that there are going to be so many new opportunities that are going to arrive with it, and just to be open to it. Just because like there was an old way of doing things, the old way doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be right.
Wonderful. We have about 4 minutes. I wonder if any of the audience would like to ask a question to our amazing panel of experts. Raise your hand now. Life is short. Anyone? I see a hand over there.
A question to the panel. Do you think we should actually have more coverage from mainstream broadcasters to help get the message out there? Because until you get a major broadcaster behind a product or a service, you will never get adoption. And that means traditional broadcasters, not the futuristic broadcasters.
So the question is to you, what type of messaging do you want?
Yeah. Because I get my mum sending me every so often. This does a lot, but don't judge my mother. She sends me Daily Mail articles, and you know, Binance has made it into the Daily Mail. And I just think, oh my god! And then it's sensationalist. And so I think you know, that's a good question. You know, what kind of messaging is it that they're going to be saying in these papers? Because already they are hitting the papers, but then you know, they're already saying quite extreme things that aren't necessarily true. So I think,
You know, papers exist to sell papers.
Yeah.
Or clicks or whatever it is. So it's very difficult when you have to play in that arena, understanding that they're not interested in an evolutionary truth or what can advance the benefit society. They're interested in getting eyeballs on their and clicks. So it's a very oftentimes contentious relationship between the two. I do think that getting more information, but I think that's incumbent upon all of us, literally, the people sitting in this room right now. You chose to take time to be here, you know, and to educate. You know, my mom called me and she goes, "You have to sell the Bitcoin thing. I just saw the news. Everything's collapsing." And you know, I said, just first of all, watch a movie, please. Stop it. You know, but think about the evolution and the agility of the businesses that we're talking about. You know, like a good example. I told my mom the other day to put on Netflix. You know, I remember when Netflix started, I'm like, wait, you mail in a DVD and they mail it? I said, this is crazy. And then that industry collapsed and they were agile and moved. And no one thinks about this in the same way. And I think to all of the panel's point, we have an opportunity to think about this and reimagine it and have it become part of our normal process. It's coming. I mean, I say this all the time. It's not asking your permission to happen. It's happening. How we deal with it and how we help the people and clients, in our case, deal with this is incumbent upon us, and it's going to drive the future of how this gets adopted. So it's all of our job to do that.
I think it also depends on what sources you go to. I think, you know, if you go to the Daily Mail, you're going to get, whereas I think it's down to the general public also to be receptive to it and to understand that they want change, and I think a lot of people don't, and so they don't go seeking new information. Again, it goes back to them being scared or not sure, and I think, so on your point, yes, I think we need to share the, you know, correct information, but also it's got to come from people that they need to want to hear the truth rather than going to tabloids or reading what's in the paper. They need to dig a little deeper, I think.
I think the world needs growth, and I think this industry is the growth that's going to give the world the growth that it needs to dig itself out of the hole. And I think the regulators need to get over themselves and get out of the way, because, you know, where does their remit lie, right? If I want to go and buy a pair of trainers, right? I go and pay my money. I spend up to, you know, £200 or £300 on a pair of sneakers, and depending on what they're going to be buying. But as soon as I turn that into a digital form, there's so much friction that's put in place in terms of the fear, in terms of we've got to get money laundering out this way, we've got to do KYC, we've got to employ lots of compliance people. And actually what we want is we want millions of people around the world to be creating these digital things and actually creating digital growth, and then taking that value out of the digital space and spending it in the real world. And actually, I don't know too many of the younger generation that actually want to buy these boomer stocks and these oil shares that all the octogenarians are kind of currently holding and trying to make sure that everybody's shilling, and they want to buy the future. And this future is in the digital space, it is in the metaverse. They want to create the metaverse. They want to, you know, my son, he's 11, he spends so much time on Epic, Fortnite, and Roblox. And when grandparents gave them money, it's like, first thing it's like, Dad, can you put this on my credit card, on my card, so I can engage in the space that I want to exist in? And yeah, it's going to be a nice position where they can start to build and use their creativity that's currently being sapped from them by all the various different kind of apps and imagination-sucking devices, when they can put that creativity back into the space that they enjoy and actually start earning and making a living from it.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I remember one of the headline news this week was British Museum is now entering the metaverse through Sandbox. So I think anything like that, if more established organizations are doing something similar, so every time when I go to Starbucks, they are giving me like loyalty rewards through my NFT. So every time when I drink coffee and thinking about Starbucks and other related like massive retail chain on global scale, that's where we start have much better fast adoption at scale.
Yeah, that's the point. It's being able to incentivize these media companies to be able to participate in a way that benefits them. At the moment, the way that benefits them is sensationalized news. So people like to hear that this guy is going to make £120 million and he lost all of his Bitcoin and it's in a dumpster truck, and they're having to like shovel crap in order to get to that Bitcoin. Like, that's what's selling at the moment. Until we move away from that narrative and actually have these companies actually creating stuff on these blockchains because they see the value, and the value is actually bigger than the news, that's when we'll start to see the shift in the media.
Exactly. So life is not easy, but we are still moving ahead with a positive note. So let's put our hands together for this wonderful panel of experts for their great insights. Yeah. Thank you. I'll hand over to our amazing MC.